let's talk about 40 Creek. 40 Creek is really the darling of a lot of Canadian whiskey connoisseurs, because 40 Creek played a pretty important role in really bringing Canadian whiskey to the limelight as producers of some of the best whiskey in the world. I think they've done a lot for Canadian whiskey. It's located in Grimsby, Ontario, near Hamilton, which is not too far from Toronto. And it's owned by Campari, which is a big Italian company. But it was founded in 1992. John Hall, who was a winemaker, bought a previous distillery that was making brandy and started to make whiskey. And when he started to make his whiskey, he looked at whiskey from a bit of a winemaking perspective and thought about sort of a meritage blend in terms of, as a winemaker would treat each grape variety specifically and then blend them together. Wanted to do the same with whiskey. And so he treated corn very specifically, matured it in heavily charred barrels, looked at barley, distilled it on its own, matured it in medium charred barrels, and then with rye, wanted to kind of preserve all the delicate character in rye, and would mature it in lightly toasted barrels. So you had 3 different grains treated specifically to generate a profile. They would then be blended together once they were mature, and then usually married in a cask, and then eventually bottled. So really neat the way that John Hall approached it. In Canada generally, we tend to treat each grain by itself and do pure corn, pure rye, and blend them after. So from that perspective, it wasn't particularly new. But what was new was John Hall's ability to really reach people and be able to talk about what made Canadian whiskey important and special. And initially they released a few whiskeys. They released a 3-grain and a barrel select. And these were fairly cheap bottles. And they did really well. And barrel select still to this day is a really great whiskey for the price. So try it if you can. And he was really able to draw people in. So pretty neat. They started to release these really good whiskeys. They released Confederation Oak, which was a whiskey that was matured in Canadian oak. It's still Corgus Alba, it's still American white oak in terms of the species, but because of how it grows in Canada, it gives different characteristics. So that Confederation Oak whiskey, the earlier batches of it, just kind of stunned the whiskey world and really opened people's eyes to some of the complexity, subtlety, balance that Canadian whiskey was achieving. And so, as the brand was being built up, another thing that 40 Creek did was start to build these limited editions, and they've been on this long run of annual limited editions, all of which that have been, very, very unique, and the best of them have been among the best Canadian whiskey ever made. So, pretty unique. There's a whiskey weekend every year. Just a great event. Most bigger Canadian distilleries are generally closed for tours. They've kept their doors open, and it's been a great service, I think, to Canadian whiskey fans. So if you go there, you can get the first dibs at the annual limited editions. There's music, there's barbecue. It's a fun time. So that's a bit about 40 Creek. It is really an interesting distillery. It's maybe not as big as you might think. It's an order of magnitude or 2 smaller than some of the really big whiskey distilleries in Canada. But it's still sizable. They sell a lot of whiskey in Texas, interestingly enough, and quite a bit here in Canada as well. That's it. I wanna taste some whiskeys, but some of the best Canadian whiskeys I've ever had have been 40 Creeks, and 2 that I want to point out in case you ever get the chance to try them. One is Confederation Oak Reserve, You can still get it. There's still batches going out. Some of the earlier batches, the first one, and then also batch B, which was my favorite, just absolutely stunning. Just incredibly balanced, incredibly complex. You could just spend a long time with them. My favorite 40 Creek has been 40 Creek Evolution. It was the 2014 special release. I maintain is still the best nose I've ever had on a whiskey. Different stage in my life, I suppose, but when I first got the bottle, I opened it and I nosed it for 3 hours and it captivated my attention. I was locked in, and the reason it was so interesting is it kept changing, and there were all these contrasting notes that I could smell in the nose, and you'd have everything from olive to, rich kind of wet earth to cocoa to almonds to raisins. I can still remember this. It was really, really made an impression. So that's been one of my favorite whiskeys ever, and my favorite 40 Creek. I do really like the Confederation Oak as well. So in terms of whiskeys I'd recommend trying, their barrel select is quite good. It's around $28 these days. They also make a copper pot, which is a bit of a more flavorful barrel select. It's so if you like barrel select, it's worth trying the copper pot as well. And then Confederation Oak's an interesting one to try. And their limited editions are usually worth a go. There's been a few years where they haven't been as strong, but when they're on, and they're really good, and they're always interesting and unique. So this year, and I'll taste this whiskey in the next video, they released Master's Cut, which was just a phenomenal Canadian whiskey, and it's probably my favorite thing that they've released since 2014. So we'll taste that in the next video.